Good afternoon. I'm Feng Shenghu, Dean of Arts and Sciences. Thank you all for joining us today to celebrate the installation of George-Levi Gayle as the John H. Biggs Distinguished Professor in Economics. On behalf of WashU and Arts and Sciences, I extend my warmest welcome to all of you attending in person or watching our live stream. We are delighted to have several family members joining us for this wonderful occasion. They include George's wife, Limo Golan, whom we installed as the Lawrence H. Meyer Professor of Economics right here just a few weeks ago. We also like to welcome their son, Itai, who is a soccer player, and George's cousins, Neville, Janice, and Barbara Evans, and Deborah Nugent. Thank you all for joining us today. Would you please stand up? Thank you all for helping us mark this special occasion. It is hard to believe that the end of the academic year is upon us. There's always so much to celebrate at WashU, and it is a natural time to reflect on all the accomplishment of this past year. Washington University is in the midst of an incredible period of transformation, and the momentum is palpable. With the launch and implementation of the Here and Next strategic plan, WashU is on a steep and inspiring trajectory. Arts and Sciences is no exception. In fact, our school has launched some of the most ambitious and far-reaching initiatives this campus has ever had. Together, we are focusing on transformative scholarship that will help uncover solutions for some of the world's most pressing challenges. We're investing in our students, faculty, and community in ways that will change the landscape of our school and Washington University for decades to come. The Arts and Sciences vision pushes the boundaries between disciplines, departments, and schools, and it emphasizes innovation and public impact, and it centers the diversity of our community as well as the diversity of the scholarship we pursue. We are investing in research that will help us understand, unravel, and reimagine the systems and structures of race, gender, power, economic equity, and social justice. The scholarship of our faculty honoree today, George-Levi Gayle, is an excellent example of this work. A member of the Arts and Sciences faculty since 2012, George is a labor economist. His current research investigates discrimination and gender gaps in labor market outcomes, the link between fertility, labor supply, and parental time investment in children, and many other socially and economically relevant topics. And equally important, George is a dynamic leader. I am grateful that he has agreed to assume the role of chair of the Department of Economics in just a few weeks. I look forward to partnering with George to advance the Department of Economics. You'll hear more about George's many accomplishments from the current chair of economics, Gaetano Antinolfi, in just a few minutes. And of course, we would not be here today without the generosity of alumni John Biggs and his late wife, Penelope Parkman Biggs, who shared a lifelong commitment to Washington University and Arts and Sciences. The Biggs have passionately supported faculty and students in the departments of economics and classics for many years. John graduated from Harvard with a bachelor's degree in both classics and mathematics. He then returned to his hometown of St. Louis and joined the General American Life Insurance Company, where he quickly rose through the ranks to become chief financial officer. His wife, Penelope, pursued graduate study at WashU, earning a doctorate in comparative literature as well as a master's degree in classics. In 1977, John received an offer from then Chancellor William H. Danforth to serve as Washington University's Vice Chancellor for Administration and Finance. He served in that role until 1985, and during that time, he implemented significant improvements that reflected his background in insurance and innovative mathematical structures. While at WashU, John was elected to the board of TIAA, the Teachers Insurance and Annuity Association of America, and as a trustee, he made substantial contributions to their financial products. He was also a member of the National Bureau of Economic Research, eventually serving a term as its chair. Later in his career, John joined Santerre Trust Company as its CEO. He then became president of TIAA and later as its chair. He added a number of innovative new products and services during his 13-year tenure at TIAA, and he led a robust effort to improve corporate governance, in particular, encouraging board opportunities for women and people of color. John spent the next 15 years at New York University's Stern School of Business, where he led a research unit in the regulation of insurance companies and taught undergraduate and MBA courses. Over the years, John and Penelope sustained close ties with WashU in many ways. While serving as Vice Chancellor, John was also a student, earning his doctorate in economics from WashU and received an honorary Doctor of Humane Letters. He's currently a member of the Board of Trustees and a member of the Arts and Sciences National Council. He's also an honorary member of the New York Regional Cabinet and the founding chair of Washington University Investment Management Company. Penelope, who taught literature at Lindenwood University and Latin at Mary Institute, now MICDS, stayed deeply connected to our Department of Classics. In 2002, John and Penelope committed to establishing the John H. Distinguished Professorship in Economics, as well as the John and Penelope Biggs Distinguished Professorship in Classics. They also founded the John and Penelope Biggs Residency in Classics. To honor Penelope, who passed away in 2022, John most recently created the Penelope Biggs Scholarship and the Penelope Biggs Fellowship to provide direct support to undergraduate and graduate students in classics. John, we're so grateful for the incredible contributions over the past few decades from you and Penelope to our university, to the school, and to the classics department, to the economics department. And now I would like to invite John to the podium to deliver his remarks on this special occasion.
Well, thank you. This has been a long time coming. It was in 2012 that we decided to give 2 distinguished professorships to Washington University. One in classics and one in economics. That rather divided up between the two of us. Penelope was an unbelievably able classicist and loved that and enjoyed very much the relationships here. And she quickly got through to a PhD in Comp Lit and went on to a teaching career. And one of the things all professors ought to appreciate is the accolades that come after you die. That I've heard from her students, particularly at Mary Institute, because she was teaching younger women there, that the appreciation. She also taught Lindenwood and other places. We have had a long a relationship with Washington University, and Washington University has given more to us than we have given to the university. And I look back on my economics experience here. When Bill Danforth recruited me to come to Washington University, be the vice chancellor for finance, I had a question in my mind that I really thought I would like to write a dissertation on this subject. It was the fact that the Social Security system had created life insurance benefits when a person died and left children. They get economic benefits. They're monthly payments that go to them. The calculations have been done that there was more life insurance issued in America under the Social Security system than the total private life insurance business that had been around since the 18th century, which was a startling observation. When I got interested in this question, they stopped creating that report because they were afraid that might be seen as a political issue of some kind. But I wanted to find out how much actually was involved, how much displacement there was of private insurance, which was the natural thing you would think. And I did my dissertation and found out there was virtually no loss due to the Social Security benefits. The faculty was generous to me. They made it clear. Well, I had talked with Bill Danforth about the fact that I had gotten an extreme interest in economics because of the actuarial work that I had done and the role in the management of that company. But I said, do you think there would be any possibility that I could possibly do a PhD while I'm there? And he breezily said, oh, sure, they're right down the few blocks away, so you can go to the classes or whatever you want to do. But he didn't tell me, you've got to get clear of the economics department. When I presented myself and said I wanted to do this PhD, they were appalled. At first they said, nobody over age 40 can possibly do that. And I said, well, give me a chance. So I had to pass 2 courses that were very mathematical and really did distinguish who could be going on. If you passed those courses, then you could go ahead, but if you didn't, you then took some economics courses and got a master's. Larry Meyer was one of my teachers. The old timers here may remember the micro teacher. They were 30 years old, both of them. I was the vice chancellor of the university. That created a certain tension, worry on their part. We're going to have to flunk this guy because he's clearly not going to perform. And what happened was Rick Warren Bolton was one of the long timers here. Said, well, when you turn in your papers, just put your Social Security number on it, not your name. So I went up and gave my Social Security number, and he looked at me and he said, oh, thank God. So I knew I had passed. I went on and did that dissertation. They gave, where they were generous is there was absolutely nobody in the economics department who had any interest whatsoever in life insurance. I was extraordinarily well qualified, and I had a database that was absolutely perfect for this. So I was almost in the first weeks beginning to talk about putting that together. But I enormously enjoyed the coursework that I was able to take, and getting away from an administrative job there were days when it was hard work. I am used to getting up very early in the morning and doing any kind of work that I need to do and reading and whatever. And so that's how I manage the time. I was a little jealous of the fact that we were getting this done after Larry Meyer had presented his. The first professor that we had was Tim Moore, was a classics professor, and has turned out to be an absolutely wonderful energizing in the classics department. An example I could give you is within 2 years after he had arrived, I attended one of his classes, and they were reading the Iliad, and there were 110 students in that course. We didn't have that kind of enthusiasm. He did a wonderful thing. He had the students come up and act out the parts. So one person would be Achilles, another person Agamemnon, they'd scream at each other and denounce each other. The students loved doing that. He had a great gift for that. Also at his induction as the big professor of classics, he sang a song of an ancient Latin poet that surprised the chancellor at that time and surprised all the rest of it. We didn't have the slightest idea what he was doing. But I want to say to George, we really expect him to sing something about economics. But now, given his childhood in Jamaica, he might have a song he could really be cool. But we are delighted with this appointment and appreciate very much Dean Hu's efforts in pushing this forward. There has been, there've been starts and stepping back, but it was a clear push forward to get this appointment made. And I've read the material, and you're about to hear one of his colleagues tell you about his career in economics. It's a very distinguished one. Thank you.
Thank you, John. We are very grateful for your help in maintaining such a high academic standard with colleagues. Thank you and good afternoon and welcome. It's a great honor to introduce George Gayle as the John H. Biggs Distinguished Professor in Economics. My job as department chair is to try to give you a sense of why George got such a great honor. George holds a PhD in economics from the University of Pittsburgh and joined Washington University in 2012 after 8 years at Carnegie Mellon. Since George joined WashU, he has been a great colleague to work with on many projects, especially in the last few years when we closely collaborated in recruiting additional great colleagues. George has made important contributions to several fields in economics. His early research was in econometric theory, but soon expanded to include labor economics, the economics of the family, and the economics of education. An important trait of George's work is the depth of the question that he focuses on. The idea is always about the very fundamental forces that drive an issue, and that issue may be executive compensation, career choice, the formation and transmission of human capital over time, household taxation and labor supply, the persistence of inequality, or more recently, the effects of the COVID pandemic. The identification of these fundamental economic forces in George's research always begin with economic theory. The econometric methods that George helped developing are then used to estimate parameters and quantify the forces that impact the research question. So these models, together with the estimation procedure that accompany them, are what economists refer to a structural approach to applied economics. Economic theory in this research approach is a tool that helps identify causal relationships and separate them from statistical correlation. Economists believe that this type of analysis creates the possibility of designing effective social policy. George is an important leader in this literature. George's contributions to Washington University go far beyond research. George had to take an unusually high load of responsibility in teaching econometrics because of the small size of our faculty, and he has instructed a generation of students on structural estimation methods and has worked as dissertation advisor with many students who, in the best economic tradition, are now his collaborators. This is not it. Beyond the department, as generations of deans could attest, George has been unusually generous in devoting his time to numerous important university committees, including the Committee on Tenure and Promotion, which alone requires a great deal of effort and commitment. From a personal and perhaps very selfish point of view, I'm most grateful to George for taking over as department chair in July. George is assembling a great team, and I'm certain that under his leadership, the department will accomplish great goals. Thank you, George. We are all looking forward to supporting your efforts and having you as a colleague for many, many years to come.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be at a chair installation where I'm actually going to be able to understand the talk. It doesn't happen very often. George, I am so pleased to be able to present this medallion to you in front of your colleagues here with us and those who are joining us virtually to honor your distinguished career at Washington University and also in anticipation of the good work to come. The front of the medallion reads, the John H. Biggs Distinguished Professor in Economics in Arts and Sciences. And on the obverse, George-Levi Gayle, May 17th, 2023. George, congratulations.
First, I would like to thank Dean Hu and Chancellor Martin for organizing this event. I would like to thank John Biggs and his family for donating and for continuously supporting Washington University. So my talk today is going to be about the distance travel from data to policy. And distance travel means many things. It means where we're coming from. It means the road we take to where we end. And it also means when we take data, how far can it take us without models? And so today I'm going to give a short overview of what my work has been over the last 18 to 19 years, and also what my work will be in the future. I want to start out by thinking of where it started. It started with Iona Gayle and Levi Gayle, and I'm sorry that he's not here to see this. My mom, Iona Gayle, is still here, and this is where it started. So I want to first start by thanking them. I want to also thank my family for showing up. And more importantly, I would like to thank my support team, Limor Golan and Itai Levi Gayle, for supporting me and for always being there and for being my partner in crime, so to speak. So let me think about how I grew up. I grew up in Black River and Parity in St. Elizabeth. And Black River is a old logwood town, and Parity is a fishing village from which all of us that are sitting on this other side here are from. I studied economics at the University of West Indies, and then I went to grad school in a cold place called Pittsburgh, which is much different from Black River. And there, my journey began from data to policy. So I started out as an econometrician, and it was interesting that I was introduced today as a labor economist. And that means that I have achieved something. I have transformed myself from being a technical math guy, as John would say, to something that would be somebody who can talk about something that Chancellor Martin will understand. And that is going to be labor economics. So in grad school, I did my dissertation in structural econometrics. My advisor was Jean-Francois Richard. And econometrics started and focused on basically asking a few questions about what can data tell you about an economic structure, and whether or not when you have data and an economic structure, without making any other assumption, what can you get? Right? And the answer to that question very early on, coming through the Coles Foundation, the Coles Commission, was basically that you cannot get anything. And it's funny that these debates are the same debates we're having today. You know, we have a lot of data, and data mining and data machine learning, and we have a lot of data. And so what can we learn from this? And this goes back to say, sometimes we have to make some form of assumption. So the thing basically says, okay, fine, if we have data and we have a model, we need to figure out what can the economic model deliver, right? What can we have to do in terms of making statistical decision, and what we have to take on faith. There's always some part that is not testable that we're going to take on faith. So I started out my career basically looking at these semi-parametric relationship, which basically means relaxing some of the assumptions to see how far we can go in relaxing the functional form assumption of some of these statistical assumptions. And it wasn't necessarily the most fulfilling thing to me. And then I went to Carnegie Mellon. And there, I started to transform into somebody who was more interested in policy. And not just policy, but how can data inform us about policy outcome, right? And in that way, we basically think about policy in terms of how effective a policy can be when either we don't observe the actual counterfactual, that means the policy has never been implemented, or after we have seen only implementation in data, and how can we isolate those effects? So we normally, I normally start out my class in the fall by saying, there are two forms of policy evaluation. Data can tell you either something about ex-ante policy evaluation, or we can tell you something about ex-post policy evaluations. And those are normally think of as different spectrum of the thing, right? Unfortunately, they're actually quite similar in the sense that all we're trying to understand is to make or to construct what we're going to call plausible and credible counterfactual in a world that we do not see all the outcome and all the variables, right? And that's what Gaetano so aptly put as the structural approach to today's narrative. So my research area in terms of going from policy to data looks basically at three main issues. Generally speaking, labor economics, and there you can look at my work in terms of looking at wage dynamic, mobility, and how it can guide policies. Family economics, which is kind of a unique thing about Washington University in the sense that that is a strand of my work that I developed here. And that kind of research looked at how the inter-household allocation or the differences within household behavior, how they impact family, and how by promoting these different type of welfare, we can actually improve either the policy outcome or we can improve the policy outcome. And then kind of the thing that started it all, managerial compensation. And this is basically looking at how we can think about the dynamics of pay and how different attributes of managerial compensation is going to affect corporate governance. So I just want to give you just a quick overview because we have food waiting and I don't want to spend too long talking, of over my research in these different areas and how they go from data to policy. And so the first one I want to look at is the stuff that I have done in terms of the wage dynamics and how they emphasize how labor market policy can promote equity and efficiency. And there are a lot of people that talk about inequality, and we have it all in these different things. The exemplary work here is the work with myself and Lemore and my mentor, Bob Miller. And in these cases, we look at how wage inequality can be used to inform policy about, let's say, narrowing the wage gap, right, in terms of the gender wage gap or the racial wage gap. And by taking the data and putting together with a model and understanding the identification and how those counterfactual policies are going to work in a world that we have not yet seen, we can guide policymakers into how to efficiently design some of these policies that we have not seen. Another area is how we go to the family policies. And this look at how within household decision matters for policy outcome and taking what we call a unitary approach, how that may not, for instance, give us these different things. And we have a lot of data. We have data on individual behavior. We have data on individual wages. But most time we only have data on household consumption. Right? So without an economic model to distinguish who is going to consume what and how the allocation actually happens, the data alone cannot tell us how the policy is going to work out, right? So a classic example of this is my latest work that has to do with some of my students, has to do with how family leave policy is going to affect intergenerational mobility of kids from lower strata of society. And one of the things that we think about in terms of how these type of models can actually inform policy debates, although we have the data, is by looking at these different type of policy, we can see that even when you give parental leave to the woman alone, right, they are passed through to actually the behavior of the spouse, right? And that, in effect, can then counteract some of the inequality that we actually see in the household. And in the paper with my student, Andres and Andrea, we actually show that actually not only does protected leave have these effects on the investment in kids, but they actually have a big effect at the bottom of the distribution, and they actually promote intergenerational mobility, although it's only given to the working mother in this particular case. And finally, I'm going to look at my work in terms of corporate governance. And one of the classic examples of this, which I was talking to John at lunch last week about, is when you think about after the Enron crisis, right? There was like a failure in corporate governance, right? And the question then become, how do we reform these different aspect of corporate governance? And we had the Sarbanes-Oxley law passed, and we have Dodd-Frank, and we have all of these different things. But the question then becomes, are they effective, right? And it's interesting that in an example that John gave of having a life insurance being crowded out by something provided by the government. Is it true then that these regulations are just crowding out other regulations or other incentive that the private sector was providing, right? And does it make a difference? And what we show in that policy evaluation paper that is published in the Journal of Accounting Research is that actually it didn't make much difference in terms of the actual level of compensation. In fact, what it did was actually increase compensation for the managers in that particular case. And what happens is because there is an unintended consequence of that the liability that the managers are facing went up, right? And that had to be compensated in the compensation. So here we have a situation where we have passed laws to actually lower compensation, and it turns out in equilibrium to actually increase in compensation. And that is the point I want to end on, is that data alone cannot speak for itself. And that if we want to go from data to policy, we have, at least in economics, we have developed two approaches that basically try to drive us there. And these approaches relies on assumptions, and more importantly, they rely on understanding economic theory or behavioral theory. Thank you for coming very much.
Thank you, George, for the insightful presentation. George is a very talented man in many ways. I was a little disappointed that you didn't sing a song for us. But I do know he's a very good soccer player. So once I introduced George as somebody who used to play soccer for the Jamaican national team. And he said, no, I only was playing for the Jamaican Olympic team. It's like, only Olympics, right? So, you have a question, Itai? Your dad can answer the question. Are you answering the question, George? Okay. And John, we are so incredibly grateful for your continued support to arts and sciences and to WashU. And just the two, like George, John is just incredibly talented in so many ways. I am personally grateful for you to serve on the Arts and Sciences National Council. I have always enjoyed interacting with you. And hear your storied history in St. Louis and many, many words of wisdom to share with people as well. So thank you all so much for joining us for the celebration today, and I now invite you all to join us for the reception in the back of the room.